So you're here today with Ron Burnett, the president of Emily Carr University of Art and Design, which is an impactful art school here in Canada and a crucial institution for the city of Vancouver. This has been a pivotal year for this university as we moved from Granville Island onto this completely brand new campus on Great Northern Way, built specifically to host us. This is very significant because since 1925, Emily Carr University has never had its own home. And for the first time in 93 years, Emily Carr University stands in its own land, which transforms its identity and its role in the city, and has the opportunity to remain as a legacy for many years to come. So Ron, you've been president since 1996, but you also started teaching when you were just 23 years old. What is something that you remember from your academic experience that you think has changed you?
Well, I want you to imagine the biggest classroom at McGill University that you can possibly imagine. It's so big that your voice is lost when you speak in it. And it has 600 to 800 seats in it. It slides downward. It's not like this beautiful auditorium, which is very intimate. It's very lacking in intimacy. And I walked into that class one day. I was asked to teach a film course, and I walked into the class one day, and I was just looking around, and I thought, oh my God, there's so many people here. And I sat down in the middle, and I had a mic with me, and I passed around the mic, and I just said, why are you taking this class? Why in heaven's name would you come into a class with this many people in it? It's going to be impersonal. It's not going to work. They didn't know that I was the prof. So they kind of were wondering, who is this strange guy, sort of asking me these stupid questions. And they answered in a very funny way where they said, well, I really want to watch some film. So it was a spectator sport and so on. And these questions went on for about 20 minutes or so. And then somebody in the back, and this was an extraordinary space because everybody in each particular part of it actually was, in some respects, its own community. And somebody in the back said, where's the prof? Where's the prof? And then everybody started clapping on the chairs and so on. This resounding music, actually, with respect to what Haig was suggesting, suddenly blew out of the room. I ran away and went up to my office and sat down for a moment and thought, okay, how am I going to do this? And I sort of tousled my hair a bit when I had hair. And I came back down into the front, and I looked up at them, and they said, he's the prof. And from that moment onwards, we had a relationship with each other as a group that is indescribable. I still know probably a third of the group of people in that room. I still have contact with others from time to time. They walk into my office from time to time and say, where's Ron? We had an intimate relationship, and I attribute a good deal of it to the extent that each community was allowed its own place in that room. What I played with was the idea that if you're from a particular culture and you prefer to sit with those people, sit with them. If you're involved in sports, sit together and even talk while I'm talking. By the way, talking while someone is talking is not rude, but that's something we can talk about as we move on here.
Thank you for that amazing anecdote. And we kind of talked a little bit about this story in more detail, and you said, that space, it was very impersonal, it was very big. And for you, that was obviously something you learned for the future and for the design of this university. So as we're here in this amazing theater, how did those questions of design come into place when creating this new campus?
So it's a really good question, and it's an important question to answer. There were easily 300 to 400 meetings with this entire community. When our host said, this is the collective representation, that I am the collective representation of the institution, that's actually false. This entire institution collectively represents itself. And this building, the openness, the airiness, the transparency, the ease of movement, the sense of actual joy. People who come into this building come to see me and say, I'm really happy. Why? It's because suddenly your ceiling is higher. Suddenly the air is cleaner. We have a tremendously complex filtration system to keep the air clean. So the way in which the building evolved was a consequence of all of our discussions. It really represents everybody's desires. It's not everyone. There's some people who are unhappy, but that's okay. it represents nearly everyone's desires, and it really represents, in some respects, the future of art and design education. We just had a visit from Budapest, from Rotterdam. These are schools that are struggling to define themselves. And the first thing they said was, this is the first time we've come into a purpose-built art school. And what does purpose-built mean? Well, it means something that is actually adjusting all the time and growing and evolving with the disciplines that constitute it. And in some senses, the building and the way it's built is built as a plug and play, which means that much of it can be taken apart. It's really just a warehouse, 4 floors divided. But much of it can be taken apart. Many of the walls can come down. Many of the doors can disappear. So if someday painters really want to interact with designers, they can take down the walls between them and begin to see each other's work. So there's so much that actually can change here that it will evolve, I hope, from generation to generation of students and faculty and staff.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, because my next question was actually going to be, you've really stated the importance of disciplines coming together to build that community. Can you expand further on that?
Well, Haig made some reference to this, and it's an important point. I don't believe that any individual or single discipline is best at its task without every other discipline interacting with it. I think that we have too strong a focus in general in education on specialization, and too strong a focus on outcomes. Learning, if it's anything, if it's everything, which it is in fact, is best achieved, best understood, best expressed, best explained to oneself and to others if it's multidisciplinary, if it's looking for solutions and answers in all sorts of places and not just in one place. So if the ideal school to me is a school where people build projects, work together, where they discover each other. It's about people. Most of the education in a good educational institution takes part in the hall. I mean, it happens in the hallways, happens in the coffee shop. It happens in the informal places. In fact, 92%, by the way, of most learning happens informally. So most of the time you're learning anyway. So why not break it down further? Why not open it up more? Why not give more space, more? You have the air, you have the height, you have the space, you have the plug and play. Now take the disciplines apart. Rebuild them. Rename them. Let's talk about flow. Let's talk about time. Let's talk about history. Let's rediscover what it means to build a discipline as opposed to always being subjects of the discipline.
And moving on right now, this is one of your areas of interest, but you have many of those, and like Haig might say, you're probably a polymath. So why don't you tell us a bit more about those areas of interest?
So I've been studying and researching psychology, psychoanalysis, anthropology, ethnography, the neurosciences, all in one giant mess, like a big meal that you never stop eating. Mm-hmm. And in the course of exploring all of these various disciplines, and by the way, I've actually published in a lot of them, in the course of exploring all these disciplines, I've discovered that the connective tissue that really links all those pieces together is subjectivity, is audience, is the way people experience words and language, and the way language creates experience as we speak it, as we read it, as we listen to it. And the beauty of being in many different fields at once is not that you're terrible in all of them, or that you're fantastic in all of them. You have to find a middle ground, a middle space that defines to you and to the people you talk to exactly where your strengths lie. And one of my strengths, I think, is that I am deeply empathetic. I really feel, and I love teaching because of it, I really try at my best to feel what other people are feeling. And that comes out in all the work I do, in all the writing I do, and in fact, in my leadership.
And it also in your film. And right now we're going to play a film.
So we're playing something that is 51 years old, by the way. And this film, and I'm only 12. And this film is a 4-screen film. And I want to tell you about the process so that you understand that a very simple idea created complexity. And I achieved a fair bit of fame with this film because everybody said, well, how did he do it? You'll notice, by the way, that time is going backwards and forwards here. And I'll explain that too. So there used to be a medium called single 8. There's one person in this audience that knows that. And that medium of single 8 was essentially 50 feet wrapped around a little reel. you'd shoot the first 25 on one side, and then you'd flip it and shoot. You had to go to run away into a dark room, flip it, and then you'd shoot the other side. You'd send it to the lab, and the lab would actually split the film, join the two ends, and it would be sequential. So I just said to the lab, and I never forget this conversation with this wonderful French-Canadian, where I said, don't split the film. And he said, I have to split the film. And he said, no, you don't have to split the film. Just develop the 16 millimeter to 25 feet. Forget about the 50 feet. No. This is not a film if it's not 50 feet. And we had a wonderful talk about that, and he finally didn't split it. So what you're seeing is actually a demonstration in Montreal that was an effort to turn McGill, where I was a student, into a French university. So the story of the film is quite fascinating. I did, at one point, think about wrapping it around a tree and filming that, but I didn't do it. So part of what I feel about this medium, and we'll let this play as we talk about a few other things, is that film, to me, both analog and digital, is not just about images, it's not just about content, it's not about form, it's not about structure. It's about experience, it's about subjectivity, it's about emotion, and fundamentally it's about passion.
And about the audience.
And about the audience. And so I've been fascinated for my entire life about what is an audience. And I'm fond of saying that if we actually knew exactly what we were going to say to each other before we said it, we'd probably be really, really unhappy. So most of the time when we talk to each other, we don't know exactly what we're going to say. Actually, how many of you are daydreaming right now? Okay, well, good. Because you don't know exactly what you're going to say, so you stumble into what you're going to say. So that's why TED Talks are funny, because they're so over-prepared. I won't get into that. But you don't really know exactly which direction you're moving in. You're moving in this direction to communicate, and then you say something, but you know that you haven't said everything, and the other person hasn't heard everything. And between the gap that is created, you create your subjectivity and your interrelationship. Because if it were linear, and that's coming back to film, if it were linear, if it were simply a matter of communicating what I want to say and you will understand it, then we would be very, very boring people. And so part of the challenge with the cinema is over many, many decades, particularly producers and directors think that they're actually making a statement. What they're doing is creating the possibility or the platform for interaction. What they're doing is creating the possibility or the potential for human subjectivity to recreate itself. But they're not creating a message. And I'll finish with one thing before Annie gets really anxious, which is that in communication theory, we have this wonderful statement about kick the can theory. So if I had a can here, I would kick it. And apparently, the can will go to the other side of the stage. That's fundamentally how subjectivity is seen within communication systems still today. And the best example is, if you think about social media, the presumption, the extraordinary presumption that we are the effect of what people have said to us. It's an amazing assumption. We are not the effect of what people have done. We are not the effect of Facebook. We are not the effect of Instagram. We're resistant. We fight with it. We use it. We challenge it. And so that linearity of subjectivity is one of the most dangerous assumptions that I've tried to turn over in my 4-screen film. No, I'm just kidding.
So we're going to move on. And I just want to walk over here, and I want you to tell me a little bit more about this painting that we have on the stage.
So this is a painting by Henry Inlander, born in 1925, died in 1983. A British painter who was also my uncle. And I come from a refugee family that escaped Vienna pre-war, then had to escape Trieste, where they went to from Vienna pre-war, and then got to England just before the war began. And Henry was, from the earliest days, an artist. And this painting represents, in many ways, the synthesis of his career, because he always did self-portraits, he always did landscapes, and he always pictured his studio of work. And in some respects, it also represents the tragedy of his life. He sits there, anonymous, unknown, and despairing. And the reason the painting is important to me, and I have it in my office, is because it represents both my life and the challenges of overcoming. When you grow up in a refugee family, and there are many people in this audience who will have had similar experiences, it's never about, I hate that word post-traumatic because it means there was trauma and there is post. It's a strange term. It's continuous. It's just a matter of degree. To what degree does the trauma actually affect you and affect those around you? To what degree can you prevent your own trauma from affecting those around you? And an artist of his skill, he won the Prix de Rome. He was very, very famous at one point. The Tate owned some of his paintings. An artist of his skill could never actually overcome that burden. That's why that's sitting there.
Wow, thank you for sharing that amazing story. I wanted to ask, what's next for you?
Well, I have 3 books on the go. Liberation from being president. I shouldn't say that. I loved being president. I never thought I would be president. I don't want to be known as a president. I want to be known as someone that actually builds places where people learn. So I'm working on 3 different books at the moment. One is nearly complete. It's a fiction book. It's a novel. Yes, I can write novels, I think. And built into it is a lot of work about painting, actually, and about studios and about the work of creativity. The second book is called A Biography of Learning, and it's about education and about learning. And the third is a prose poem. All 3 books are actually in early, one book is complete, second book is half done, third book is in early preparation. So I do not stop, I will not stop. And for me, the creative engagement that comes with being a creative person is, there is no end point. You know, when people say, oh, you're leaving a really great legacy here, I said, well, okay, tell me that when I'm dead.
Okay, how do I follow that? Well, I've had a couple of signals saying that our time is well over.
We were worried.
Yes. However, I would like to conclude with one last question. You talked a little bit about audience and how that is very important to you, and I want to ask, what is one short thing that you want to leave this audience with here today?
If you understood at least 1% of what I said, tell me. If you understood 100% of what I said, you didn't understand a word. Thank you.
Thank you.